welcome to today's webinar with the title, Executive Wellness Leading from the Front. Offering wellness programs has been proven to be cost-effective in terms of cutting health-related costs and improving productivity. Such benefits are also attractive for employees and then can enhance both recruitment and retention of top talents. But when designing a wellness program, we need to create it in a line with different groups' needs and expectations. And one of the groups requiring a different approach are also executives. How to address them and design the proper actions that we all going to benefit from it is a big question. Despite ill health prevention and better productivity is important for executives to participate in such a programs for another big reason, being an example and promoting the culture of health. Since we know that people are watching and are being influenced by others' behavior, for better or for worse, it sets an important question. What is the example that executives want to be putting in terms of health and well-being? So I'm very happy to share today's discussion with two outstanding gentlemen, Dr. Dorian Dugmore and Dr. Lee Rice. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'll just give you a very short presentation of both to understand their rich experiences in the background. So Dr. Dorian Dugmore is joining us from United Kingdom, and his background involves a career linked with professional sport, both as a player and coaching, including 3 appointments as a Great Britain coach to the World Student Game football team. He gained a PhD in cardiovascular medicine, linked with his work rehabilitating cardiac patients at Action Heart in England, and then he moved to Canada to become program director of the world's leading cardiac rehab program in Toronto. He's a former Secretary General of the World Council for Cardiopulmonary Rehab and a consultant to the European Nucleus on Sport Cardiology. Dr. Dugmore designed the world best practice corporate wellness program for the sport brand Adidas and the LMA's Fit to Manage program for football managers at St. George Park International Football Centre in England. He's currently the CEO of the Wellness Academy in England, where he has helped to create many successful corporate wellness programs, and he also speaks internationally on corporate well-being. So thank you, Dr. Dugmore, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
On the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, we are hosting Dr. Lee Rice, from San Diego, and with more than 30 years of experiences as a family and sport medicine physician. I bet that Dr. Rice is one of the top ranked physicians in the United States. As a premier medical expert on wellness, both United States and internationally, Dr. Rice has been also an associate professor of family and preventive medicine at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, and is currently a clinical professor of family medicine at the Western University of Health Sciences. He served as a team physician of numerous professional athletes and Olympic teams, including San Diego Chargers, San Diego Clippers, US Olympic volleyball team, and for Oracle Racing of the American Cup sailing campaign. Welcome, Dr. Rice. Thank you for joining us. So you are, as I mentioned, sitting on the different sides of the Atlantic Ocean, but the similarities in your work and careers are remarkable. Can you share with us, how did you meet?
Well, I was in San Francisco, it must be 20, 25 years ago, to receive an award for wellness at the brand Adidas. And sitting right next to me was Dr. Rice. And I was under the impression that he got major awards as well, but I was wrong. And I think he'll correct me on that. Lee?
Yeah, well, I was, we had an international medical advisory panel formed by IRSA, which was an international organization that sort of a trade organization for international health clubs and recreation dance clubs and so forth. And we gave an award annually for the best practice. And we looked at a number of people who had volunteered to be evaluated for this award. And we gave Dorian the award for his work with the Wellness Academy for the Adidas Corporation in Manchester. And so he got an award for really the best corporate wellness program in the world, as far as we were concerned. And I, as part of that committee, sat next to him at lunch and found out that I could do one more push-up than he could do. And so we became fast friends. So we actually shared what we were doing, and we found out that we were doing so many things very much like each other with our different programs that we wanted to be sister programs. So he came down the next week to see our program in San Diego, and then I flew over to England to see his program, and we've been fast friends and good colleagues ever since.
Did you just mention an award-winning corporate wellness practice, Dr. Dugmore? Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, I mean, Adidas as a sport brand actually sponsored my doctoral research in cardiovascular medicine, which was quite unique at the time for a sports brand. Normally you'd expect pharma companies and people like that to sponsor the awards. And as a result of that, they tracked my career to working with Action Heart in the West Midlands in England, where we built a very prestigious cardiac rehab program. And then I went over to Toronto in Canada to lead the Toronto rehabilitation program for heart recovery for many patients, heart attack patients, post bypass patients, heart transplant patients. And they approached me after 4 or 5 years there and invited me to come back to the UK to build a corporate wellness program at the brand Adidas. And very simply, what we did was take all the messages we'd learned from rehabilitating heart patients and literally put the cart before the horse and use the same techniques and approaches to prevent rather than to treat heart disease. And so the main feature that really underpinned that was to get employees and leaders and the CEO himself to really look after and know their own cardiac and lifestyle risk numbers, things like blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugars, all of the key things that are risk factors for heart disease.
You were awarded for the European best practice, but Dr. Rice, are there any differences between European and US approach in designing the wellness program?
Well, I think there are many differences depending on the corporations involved. The US is so large that there's so many corporations doing it now that their overall differences are quite varied depending on how big the company is, how much money they're willing to put into it, and so forth. Initially, the initial programs were just kind of looking at health risk appraisals and giving people basic numbers. What's your blood pressure? What's your heart rate? How is your body fat? And then giving people parameters to try and achieve lower cholesterol levels and so forth. And over time, most of the programs became a little bit more complex and they became more involved with different things involved. And so we started doing programs more fun, basically, and more interactive. We tried to do prizes for people to get them incentivized to participate in these programs. We gave them gym memberships and hats and clothing and promises to go visit Dorian, you know, those sorts of things. And competition in between, we took corporations and divided their employees up into teams and had the teams compete against each other. We did some for some big companies in Las Vegas, for example, where they took big meat scales for cattle, and we weighed people in as teams. So nobody got weighed, for example, by themselves. They got weighed as a team of 5 people, all 5 on the scale at the same time. So nobody felt like they were being singled out. And then it was one team against another. And at the end of the whole program, they burned the equivalent of 200 people's worth of fat in a big incinerator and had a big barbecue and party afterwards to celebrate the whole benefit of the corporation. So they became quite involved and again, kind of fun, but it took a long time to get to those places where we could get people involved.
We were very similar. I mean, the similarities between the programs that Lee has mentioned and our programs, without us even meeting each other were almost identical. We created things like a passport for wellness, and this is a typical example of that. And in that passport for wellness, you know, all of the Adidas employees could put their key numbers that I've mentioned earlier. They could record the exercise that they were actually doing, could differentiate between male and female employees. And again, like Lee's programs that he's just mentioned, you know, we did things like combined marathons where teams of people at Adidas could join together and spend time on treadmills and compete against other departments. And so the similarities between the two approaches were amazing, really. But the background in the UK, particularly in things like wellness programs, were very much health promotion programs. You know, they lacked data. They lacked, you know, proof that the actual concept of wellness worked. And that was a significant difference compared to the United States, that is very much health insurance driven. And so, you know, they're looking at, for every dollar spent in the States, what is the saving in terms of putting in wellness programs and healthcare programs. Of course, the UK is very different because they have the National Health Service. And so the National Health Service actually pays for people to be treated and dealt with in a very, very intensive way, but very different to both Canada and the United States. So some really interesting comparisons there.
But also, as I mentioned in the beginning, when we're designing a wellness program, we always need to be cautious about the specific group, and executives for sure are such a group that needs a different approach. And I know that both of you have a lot of experience dealing with the well-being of top executives in the business as well in sport world. What do you find are some of the key challenges facing their health and well-being?
Well, for me,
go ahead, Dorian.
For me, time, I think Lee would say the same thing. Time pressure is the major thing for chief executives, making the time to look after themselves and prioritizing the chance to actually keep fit, eat properly, or sleep, get enough sleep, all of the important things that, you know, top executives really need to do, but they tend to sacrifice that compared to pushing for the success of their corporate endeavors. Lee, I'm sure you mirror the same.
Yeah, in fact, basically the number one reason corporate executives don't exercise well or don't have healthy lifestyles like they like, the number one reason by far that they say is, I just don't have enough time. Or the other one is, I've got the time, but by the time I get home from work, I start early in the morning, dark 30, and by the time I get home at night, I'm just too tired. So I don't have enough time, or I'm too tired. And I think the issue that's most enlightening is that a lot of times they don't have enough time until they lose their health. And then all of a sudden they would do anything to recapture what they've lost. And they didn't really realize all the risk factors that were leading up to what was going to happen until it happened. We take our health for granted, and when we lose that, all of a sudden all of our priorities change. But most times people have been very successful both in athletics and in the corporate world. They just assume they're going to have their health because they've always had it before. So why would it be here tomorrow? And all of a sudden they get hit by the bus, and they realize that, you know, I should be paying attention here. And we see that with our key executives, and they have a friend or somebody in their family or themselves personally have some event happen, and then they go, you know, I better pay attention to this. I want to find out what my risks are. And with athletes, oftentimes the problem has been that they keep really, really fit during their competitive years, and after they stop, they don't learn that they can't keep eating at the training table like they were always doing before. And they gain weight, they get out of shape, they lose some muscle strength, and then all of a sudden that health risk group of things that increases is compounded by the fact that now they've got degenerative joints and they've got injuries that haven't healed. And now they have a hard time working out and recapturing their health because they're so beaten up by their sport. So both those things are factors that we see. And I think Everybody's starting to get the message now. People are starting to change and realize how important health is and that that's your most important asset. But still getting the word out and getting them to try and change old lifestyle habits is not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same in terms of sports people. As you know, Eva, I've done a lot of work with the football managers, and virtually the majority of football managers, particularly those that are running leagues like the Premiership and all the divisions in England, they've all been former players. And suddenly they move from being a former player to then maybe being a coach or a manager, and they shift their whole perspective from, as a player, their focus is looking after themselves, looking after their health and well-being, you're keeping themselves in tip-top shape for performance. And then when they move to be a manager, they're looking after everybody else. And the chief executive of the LMA, a gentleman called John Barnwell, who started with me the Fit to Manage program for managers, we found this to be a major concern, where managers suddenly ate the same amount of food, didn't bother exercising, cut back on their sleep, and suddenly they find themselves in bad health because they haven't been able to make that transition from being a sports performer to now being a manager. And it's exactly, what Lee has just said about the people he's referred to as well.
You're right. They're saying when the reason is big enough, then we're ready to change. But what can we do before that reason big enough? How can we get leaders in the corporate world to be more engaged or to be more proactive toward their health and, of course, well-being as well?
Well, we did a special project that Lee has referred to, and in fact, we linked it with the work that Lee is doing in San Diego called Project Life. And Life was an acronym for Lifestyle Interventions for Executives. And basically, what we did was took 70 of Toronto's top CEOs and delivered over 2 years a program that looked at their cardiovascular health, their cancer risk, their diabetic risk. We designed training programs for them, changed their nutrition, linked with all sorts of other innovative techniques to really improve their health. And the interesting thing was that of the 70 people, of the top executives, 60% of them actually started wellness programs in their businesses. And
60.
so 60%. So the key thing that came home to me there was, if you really want to impact the health and well-being of executives, then yes, you can deliver intensive programs to them, but they will then pass that on to their workforce, to their employees, and that makes a tremendous difference. And I know that Lee and myself looked at those sorts of approaches with Project Life in San Diego as well.
And we were lucky because we captured that same philosophy, and we started a similar Project Life. We didn't have that name yet, but we were doing that program, but Dorian lent us the name. And so we won a national award for that same thing, helping executives change their life habits. And our award was for the most innovative program at helping CEOs and corporate leaders decrease the health risk factors for cardiovascular disease. And one thing that we have found over and over again is that the key thing, or one of the key things for companies to be successful in wellness programs, is having the very top people in the company, the C-suite leaders, the CEOs of the companies, buy into the program, not just with lip service and telling their employees what to do, but engaging it themselves in their own lifestyle. And when they believe it, when they act on it, and when they honor it for themselves and they're doing good self-health care, their employees see that, the other board members see that, and everybody takes their cue from the leader. And if the leader is not involved, if the leader is just paying money to offer it and telling their employees to do it, but the leader doesn't exercise, and you can tell that they don't have a healthy lifestyle, not sleeping well, overly stressed, doesn't have good relationships, then that program is doomed to failure. Every program that we've done that's been very successful, that we're proud of, has had absolute buy-in from the top of the corporation. And once they get understanding that we've always, for a long time, and Dorian knows this, we tried to do corporate wellness programs from the bottom up. We tried to get the grassroots employees to ask for the programs. It never worked. And the only time we've been successful is when we've had the CEO and the top people in the corporation. They buy into it, they do it, and then they experience for themselves the benefit of how not only their risk factors are less, but how well they feel, how the quality and meaning and happiness of their life is improved. And then they want that for everybody else. Then they want for people whose lives that they touch to be able to do that, not only with them, but oftentimes because of them and because of their support. And then they're each serving each other. So when we have really good buy-in and we've got good mentoring and role modeling from the top, that makes all the difference in the world.
Dr. Rice, you also served as a team physician for US team and other clubs that I mentioned at the beginning. What have you discovered about well-being and health awareness among athletes and the managers in the leagues? Can you share with us any interesting examples, anonymously, of course?
Sure. We've had a bunch of experiences, obviously, with athletes and managers. And the managers, there's two types of managers. We call them coaches here primarily, but they're managers in the UK and Europe. The older ones are often, like Dorian said, they used to be players themselves. Most all of them were players. And now they've gotten into sedentary lifestyles and not so healthy. And it's really hard for them to change their whole life experience. They've had 20, 30 years after playing, being a coach. And coaches, they sit in the coach's room for hours on end every day. They're out in the practice field sometimes, but they do a lot of film study, a lot of sedentariness, a lot of chart review, and now computerization and so forth. And to get them to change and take time, we've had coaches who are notorious for sleeping in their office at night. They get 2, 3, 4 hours sleep at night. They wake up in the morning, they're just trying to plot, what can I do, especially during the season? I want just one single edge to beat that next team, to win that next game. And they just sacrifice everything about that. And what we're seeing now is younger coaches who have been more fit, who are actually pretty much not exactly at their prime, but not far from it when they start their coaching, and they could carry that lifestyle over into their coaching careers. And so we're seeing the younger coaches now are not older, they're not smoking cigarettes, they're not fat, they're healthy, they're fit, they're in the weight rooms. When the players are in the meeting rooms, they're in the weight rooms, and they're encouraging each other to do that too. The athletes, the biggest problem we've had is retired athletes. During their playing careers, they're all doing pretty much now with good, they've got personal trainers, they've got nutritional experts, they've got exercise physiologists, strength trainers. But when they finish, like Dorian said, they keep eating, they don't sleep as well, they get overweight, they've got all these injuries. I've got one player, he was in 4 Super Bowls. He was the strongest man in the NFL several years in a row in a contest that they had. And his body was just beaten up. He had bad shoulders, he had bad hips, he had bad knees, he needed some joint replacements. He was so overweight, he was about 350 pounds, and he couldn't exercise because the weight on his joints just wouldn't handle it. He got sleep apnea because of that, and because of that, he was getting more tired during the day. Then he had to take sleep medication, and then he had pain medication. He got depressed because of it, and then he got diagnosed with CTE, the chronic traumatic encephalopathy from concussions. He said, all I did, I was a lineman. He said, every day I fought. And every day, he said, we talk about fighting. He said, that every practice, every snap, every play, I was just hand-to-hand combat with the guy in front of me, and we're hitting each other as hard as we could. And you do all that added up, and he thought he had CTE, and his life was just going downhill, and he was trying to tell his wife how to handle things when he was gone. We put him into a really comprehensive wellness program. He lost over 75 pounds. He started swimming for exercise. He got joint enhancement. He got really better fit in terms of musculoskeletal health. He started sleeping better. He got rid of his CPAP machine. All of a sudden, his attitude has improved. And now he's found out he doesn't have CTE. He just had the symptoms of it, all caused by depression, lack of sleep, poor diet, inflammatory lifestyle. And all those things, when they went away, he's now giving advice to younger athletes how they can maintain their health after they retire. And he's a champion now that's just a totally different person. He's got a great relationship with his wife, and he's looking forward to the next 20 years. Totally different than what he was expecting when he didn't have a wellness attitude and didn't have a plan.
I can tell you some similar stories. We did a very famous TV documentary with a program here called Trevor McDonald's Tonight program. And we took two very famous managers in the English Premiership, and at the clinic at Adidas, where we had all the sort of medical equipment for testing hearts and testing, physical capacity and looking after their cardiac risk. We put them both on treadmills and tested them to exhaustion on the treadmills. So they were wired up to electrocardiograms. They had a mouthpiece in measuring how much oxygen they were using, and they both pushed themselves to their limit. And what we found out was that very often when we were testing these managers, once they'd gone beyond 80% of their capacity, that's when we found out that they had any cardiac problems, any real problems. But they pushed themselves hard and they both fell off the treadmill at the end of the test. And one of the famous managers turned around to me and didn't say, "How well did I do, Dorian?" but said, "How far did the other manager get on the test?" But then what we did, which was really interesting, we actually went to a Premiership football game with 40,000 people watching the game, and we wired them up to electrocardiograms. We put blood pressure cuffs on their arm and monitored their blood pressure every 10 or 15 minutes. And then we took their bloods intravenously before the game, at halftime, and at the end of the game. And we found that the actual cardiac costs of watching a game were higher than being pushed to exhaustion on the treadmills. So the heart rates were higher, their ECGs had some abnormal beats in them. And one of the most dramatic things we found was that actually when we took their bloods turned milky, and the milkiness in their bloods was cholesterol. And so from watching one game, and the game, we couldn't have scripted a better game. It had all the incident we could have dreamed of. There were 4 or 5 players sent off in the game. It was a high scoring game, but it just goes to show you that the pressure and stress that happens when you're in the cauldron of managing a football game is even higher than maybe being tested in a laboratory setting. So it's quite amazing what can happen. But I've got similar stories to Lise, and I'll tell you one very quick story. We dealt with a cardiac patient that belonged to Action Heart, a cardiac program that's very famous in the West Midlands. And he'd been to see his doctor, and he was 58 years of age, and told that he should move downstairs because his life was over and all he could expect to do was maybe have a walk in the back garden on a good day. That guy, he became very famous. His name was Norman Clements, and he ran 4 consecutive London marathons and was voted runner of the year. So I think the message there, along with what Leah said, is it's never too late to actually change your approach and make a difference. And Lee's story and my stories are so similar, but with the same message at the end of them.
Very impressive stories, and I think these are the stories that we all can learn from. But the reality is, as I also see on the field when working with the organization, is that there are still some organizations that are not aware about the importance of investing in people's health, or they don't take such measures seriously. And the human resource department usually asks me, how can we convince management to be more inclined to wellness program? So Dr. Lee, maybe if you can give us any tips, how can we engage or what to say to decision makers that is worth to invest in the wellness program in organization?
Sure. One of the things that I like to do is take a CEO who's done it for his corporation in and talk with me to the CEO who's thinking about doing it, and just talk about the differences in the corporate culture, everything that happens in the company when they change and when they put in that program. And what we find is that initially the HR managers are the ones that often get involved in this, and they're just looking at dollars and cents, and they want to make sure that it's money well spent, and they want to look good on their bottom line at the end of the day. if you look at the data, most really successful comprehensive wellness programs that have objective measurements, that have follow-up, that have coaching along the way, all those things that are comprehensive, not just eat this and take 30 minutes of walking every day, they return anywhere from $3 to $5 to $9 per every dollar spent on the wellness program. Now, the trouble with the health industry is we've never had great data that shows year over year that everybody gets that same benefit. And people can point to programs that show that, well, we didn't get any benefit from that. And one of the issues is that the benefit that you get is short-term benefit and also long-term benefit. The short-term benefit can be attitude of the employees. It can be the investment of the employees in their company, feeling valued by the company. So I want to do my best for the company because they care about me. It could be the culture of the company. The long-term health benefits are not for years later. And the trouble is sometimes because employees change employment every couple of years, and even insurance companies, people change insurance companies every 2 or 3 years. The money that's spent today may not be realized as a benefit and savings until 4 or 5 years later, when those health risk behavior changes have lowered my event risk, and I'm not having a heart attack 10 years from now. So there's a couple things to look at. One is what's the investment and what's the immediate return, which is there, but also what are the more subjective returns? What does it mean to have a great workplace? What does it mean to be the employer of choice in your category because your employees love to go to work there and they're feeling like you care about them so much as an employer that I want to do my best for you because I want to return the trust that you've shown in me. I want to give all I can to you. And not only you, I want to help the person sitting next to me on the table here because she's helped me with my weight. I'm going to help her with her stress. And so it becomes a snowball effect where it's one person helping another person, and the culture, the quality of life, the meaning of life, the value that they have in the company, and therefore their productivity when they're at the company is way better. Now, that's hard sometimes to measure objectively in dollars and cents, but everybody that's put one of those comprehensive programs in place knows that it's true. And so it's the emotional value and the spiritual value of having a culture of a well workplace. It does retain employees. The most great reason why people change jobs is because they didn't think their employer cared about them. And this is every time you lose an employee, it's a major cost to the company. And so we've got studies that show that companies that put in healthy wellness programs that are comprehensive, that really care about people and prioritize and personalize the offerings for each person. So everybody doesn't have to do the same thing. There's something in it for everybody. They can all pick and choose what they want to work on themselves, and they're honored for that. And employees are not made to feel badly about themselves for the risk factors that they have. One of the biggest obstacles is, oh, my boss is going to find out that I've got high blood pressure, and then they're not going to want me. I'm not going to be put up for a raise. I'm not going to be kept or whatever. That doesn't happen. When companies find out, when the employees find out that you really care about them and you're there just to serve them, not to judge them, not to blame them for their imperfections, that we all, then the cream can rise to the top and it can be better for everybody. So it's the corporate culture and the value and becoming a company basically that's the respected employer of choice, and then the lack of turnover that happens because of that is really, I think, the best value.
If I can add to that,
yes, please, can you add something on?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that Lee referred to there was people actually moving on from company to company.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some research by a guy called Paul Bridle that's looked at tracking employment patterns throughout the years. When my father was at work, he stayed with the same company for 42 years and went from working on the shop floor to eventually becoming the chief executive of the company. That doesn't happen anymore. Paul Bridle said that, you know, young people now that are progressing through the corporate world can expect up to 18 to 20 jobs during their career. That's a huge difference compared to the days of people like my father and Lee's father. But one of the key things to really capture people is looking after them, which then will benefit retention of those key employees. I built a program for a company called GFK in London, and their chief executive was very, very switched on. And he said, look, he said, when we actually sit down and we cost the amount of money it takes to train somebody in our company, to give them the skills that help them to go forward, and then they leave, there's a double cost there. We've lost them as a key employee, but then we've got to train somebody else and bring them up to speed. And that's a significant cost. But if we can have techniques and approaches and be a caring company that keeps people with us for longer periods of time, it makes perfect sense. It's far more cost effective. So retention is a key factor. And I would support exactly what Lee has said. Retention with real data that shows the benefit, both financially and in the human cost of people, is key, is very important.
And now $1 million question for both of you. How can we engage the population, the people, employees to become more active, more health aware? Dr. Rice, if you may start.
Sure. Well, I think most people enjoy, they like to learn about statistics. They want to improve, they want to do it. The truth is, I think everybody would like to be healthier. If you asked anybody on the street, he said, would you like to be more healthy? They'd say, sure, I would like to be more healthy. So everybody's interested in health, but not everybody's committed to getting it. Not everybody's willing to pay the price to have the benefits of a healthy lifestyle or to try to change. And many people know, most people really, they know what they're doing wrong. They know what they eat that they should be eating. They know that they should exercise. They know they should sleep better. They know they should have better maybe time for their relationships, but they just don't take the time to do it. A lot of times it's because they don't have the data to encourage them on how to change. They don't know what to do. They like to change, but they're not sure how. And they've tried so many times and failed before, they don't want to look at themselves as a failure anymore. But if you show people what to do and how to do it, and you agree to partner with them in getting along the way, they're much more willing to take the chance because they feel like they've got support, they've got education, and they're on the cutting edge of doing something that's really right. And one of the things that we like to do is all this technology now, everybody's wearing wearables and apps and all these things and giving people real-time data. It's very important. And I think one of the things that can be very most helpful is giving people access to that data. And things like the 24 Life program does give people wonderful data. It's cutting edge, it's science-based, it's founded and it's supported by the clinical science and the benefit of the Mayo Clinic. So it's got a lot of largesse behind it. Sort of people know right away if you say Mayo Clinic, they know that it's credible, they can trust it. There's so many fallacies now. There's so many tricksters out there and hucksters in wellness medicine that when you find something that's really credible, that has actionable items that can give you support and follow up along the way as you try to change, it can make all the difference in the world. And so I think that's one of the key things is getting people to understand what is. My experience is that most people are not good choosers. They don't understand really the prices they're paying for the choices they're making. And if you can really educate them about the reality of that, when you choose to do this, these are the outcomes, both positive and negative. And remember, even not to choose is to choose. And so everybody has choices that we make, and everybody would like to become better choosers, but they want to know what's the truth, and they want to have help along the way, and they need to be monitored and actually held accountable for their outcomes. And if all those things can be incorporated, it can be very helpful. I think the thing like has been done with 24 Life can be a great avenue to help along that way.
Yeah, if I can just add to that as well. Bill Haskell, a famous cardiologist from Stanford University in California, ran a very famous trial called the SCRIPT trial some years ago. And he came out with a statement that I've never forgotten, which I think is very, very powerful. And he said, you can have all the big tests and all the big interventions you want, but the new medicine is actually what happens between visits to the doctor. It's what you actually do between medical assessments and wellness assessments and how you're tracked and you're followed that really will make the difference. And I would agree with Lee. Programs that have things like 24 Life with excellent information, with tracking potentials, with coaching potentials. And the other advantage is the one thing that people across the employment world are short of is time. And one of the beauties of a program like the 24-Hour Life program or Connected M Health is that people can very quickly look at visual interpretations of information. If you give people pages and pages of things to read, they won't read it. But if you can give them quick, smart, sharp information that's visual, then it can really make a difference. And that's one of the things that's happened with the LMA. I mentioned them earlier in the world of sport. They have developed superb programs now that are intervening with football managers and people in the world of sport that are very comprehensive, that offer a wide range of things. And involved in that is the tracking and coaching of people. And I think that is critically important. The other thing I would add, and we're doing a lot of this at the moment, which really makes a difference, if we go into a company and we want to really engage the company in terms of wellness, one of the smart things to do is an audit of the company. So rather than just walk into a company and say, well, you need this and this and this intervention, actually ask them what they want. You know, interview the employees, have focus groups, interview the chief executives, the leaders in the company. And when you've done that, you can then find out what they actually really would desire in terms of wellness. And so this whole idea of sort of screening companies and really understanding them is very important to promote wellness, whether it's in the world of sport or whether it's in the corporate world.
You know, I just might add, Dorian, I totally agree with you. The companies that we've been most successful for and the programs that we put on that have been the most widely participated in have been companies where they developed the wellness committee. And the wellness committee is made up of strata, all different levels within the company. And they do exactly, Dorian, as you said, you know, they tell the company, here's what we'd like to have, here's what we're most interested in, here's what would be useless to us. We've heard this before, but we want that. And when they get to design their own program with good input and with some coaching and information about what's possible, but when they can take ownership in their own program and then spread it among their peers, it's got a much better chance of being successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I agree, and I'm very glad that you both mentioned the 24-hour life, and I agree with you because also based on our experience for a good corporate wellness program, we need a variety of different measures from education, raising awareness, to more engaging programs to actually meet the needs and interests of the people. And with the 24-hour life, we're always striving to bring such measures, interventions to people as close as we can to the device we are most loyal to. And as well, we track and measure what's happening. So to give kind of feedback to organizations, what works, what doesn't, where to intervene if needed, how to boost motivation and so on. And I strongly believe that we can really change people's lives if we help them. As you mentioned, we are not good choosers, but if we are helped to choose the correct way, then for sure we are likely to succeed. But I'm more curious in terms of a corporate and sport wellness, what changes would you two like to see to improve the wellness and health of the leaders, Dr. Dugmore?
Well, the first one for sure, I think, is to get governments to look at giving things like tax relief to companies and corporates that really have good wellness programs with data that are comprehensive and multifactorial in the types of programs that they can deliver. And if a simple thing like that happened, I say a simple thing, it's not simple at all, but if governments did start to do that sort of thing, then I think there'll be a dramatic improvement in looking after the health and well-being of people in the corporate setting. And there's no better time to do it than now, because if you look at the effects of COVID in all of our countries, what that has done is made people realize the impact of something like a pandemic. And the National Health Service in the United Kingdom is struggling to cope with all of the problems that have been raised as a result of COVID. And so looking at the corporate world, it's a world that can capture looking after the health and well-being of people, because people are at work for 2/3 of their life. So what better place is there to go to than do that? My other thing, and I think Lee would agree with me here, we talked about it ourselves many times, I think there's the potential for the creation of a new wellness professional. If you look at the corporate world and you look at personnel departments, occupational medicine departments, I think it's changing. In Canada, they're now having directors of wellness and having teams of people in the business setting that are delivering wellness interventions. So what we really need to do is then educate professionals that have been to universities with the skills to deliver preventative medicine interventions into the corporate setting. And I think that is going to represent the birth of a new professional. And again, that is a very, very exciting time for the very things that we've talked about with 24-Hour Life and coaching people.
Dr. Rice, on your side, how can we improve the well-being of the leaders?
I agree with Dorian. I think from a federal standpoint, having some tax breaks and incentives from the government for companies that put money and hard asset value into employee wellness programs would be very, very valuable. It's a little different here also because we've got insurance companies rather than health insurance nationally. And so every insurance company has the ability to put programs into the companies that they insure, and they can take it off of their premiums. So in other words, we had one company that I work with still as a medical advisor, and what they do is they take a certain percentage of the premiums that companies pay for their health insurance, and they give that back to the company in terms of wellness services. And so it's a way to discount the cost to the company and be able to write that off. But I think if there's some way that we can incentivize or monetize the ability of insurance companies to help pay for wellness programs for the people who they insure, that would go a long way towards allowing people to be able to afford that and also to experience it. And I couldn't agree more with Dorian. It made me think back when I was one of the ones who started the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine. When I started in sports medicine, started being team physician for a number of professional and Olympic teams, there really was not a specialty of sports medicine. It was mainly the people taking care of athletes were primarily orthopedic surgeons just waiting on the sideline for something bad to happen, and then they take them off to the operating room. But other than that, there wasn't much going on scientifically or clinically. And so what we did was those of us who were practicing in the field, not because we were trained for it, but because we had an interest in it and just put our experience in on it, we started training other doctors to do it. And then a couple of us got together and said, isn't it a shame we don't have some body that can train younger doctors to do what we've learned to do in the locker room? And we've learned it, obviously, a lot of times not from other doctors. We learned it from athletic trainers. We learned it from physiotherapists. We learned it from nutritionists. We just applied all that different body of knowledge to the athlete and put it together in a form that they could sort of standardize it. So we started the field of sports medicine, here in the U.S., and now it's a certified, bona fide field of specialty. Same thing needs to happen, I think, with wellness medicine. And we started 20 years ago. Dorian knows this. We had a fellow who finished his sports medicine fellowship with me, and I said, we're going to do some wellness medicine with Dorian and practicing a whole new thing. How would you like to learn how to do wellness medicine? And so he did a 2-year fellowship in wellness medicine. And unfortunately, we didn't have the capacity to continue to pay doctors to just learn that because we weren't affiliated with a big funding institution. But I think there needs to be some way to have doctors who are interested in wellness and interested in preventative medicine, behavioral medicine, to codify that, to put that field of knowledge into a systematized way to train younger doctors, because younger doctors are very interested in wellness medicine. they're tired of treating sick people and diseased people and chronic disease that's caused by iatrogenic things we do for ourselves. The younger doctors of today are really interested, just like they were 20 years ago. Sports medicine was the most sexy specialty there was. Now it's preventative medicine, it's behavioral medicine, it's proactive wellness medicine. It's how can we keep people being healthy? It's much more fun as a doctor to treat people that are compliant and interested in health than it is to treat people that are just sick and have chronic disease. We're just trying to manage chronic disease with medications. Not very exciting and not very energizing for doctors. So I totally agree with Dorian. I think this whole new field needs to come to the fore internationally. And now with, it used to be everybody sort of husbanded their own knowledge because that was my ego involved. And now everybody is sharing everything and the good practices. Good universities, good practices, good medical societies are all sharing best practice, best information. And it's time, I think, for an international effort to improve the ability of clinicians of all types, because no one doctor can know everything. Like Dorian is a PhD in cardiovascular and cardiopulmonary medicine, and I'm a family physician and sports medicine physician. We need nutritionists and PM&R specialists, et cetera, all to be on the team cooperating, putting what they can in together to the knowledge base so we can offer that in some sort of a cohesive manner for companies, for individuals, for athletes, for everybody to be what we call weller than well. Not just not hurting, but to be all you can be.
If I can just add a couple of things to that, I agree totally with everything that Leah's reflected on there. I think there are certain populations to look at as well. And one of them, going back to the world of sport, is the retired athlete. And that's a group of people when athletes have reached their sell-by date and they're no longer competing at top level, the transition that they need to make from being a top athlete to then lifestyle wellness and lifestyle well-being is a vacuum that really needs dealing with. And I know Dr. Robert Scales at the Mayo Clinic is doing some research on that. And one of the people we're going to actually involve and invite is Dr. Rice. But that is a huge population. And it's not just professional athletes. It's semi-professional athletes, amateur athletes, people that have been competing and then suddenly have to make that transition from what they consider top-class performance to lifestyle health and lifestyle well-being. And that is a huge population that we can apply wellness to. And groups, for example, and Lee's been to visit St. George's Park in England, where the LMA are doing a lot of work in that area with football managers and people relating to the world of sport. But there's a real opportunity there. And of course, anything involved with sport gets people's attention.
Thank you. And before we proceed to the last question, I will give you one question from the audience. How do you address the role of emotions and the mental part in your wellness programs?
I'd like to answer that one.
Please.
Because I think that's a great question. I'm really glad that question was asked, because I wanted to say this before we finished anyway. We talked about everybody would like to be better, and most people would like to lose weight. Most people would like to get more fit. I'd like to have less stress in my life. And the question that I try to ask people is why? Why do you want to have that change? What would be the meaning of that change in your life if you were successful in doing it? The people who, in my experience, have answered that question, who know their why, then are much more able to do the behavior that they want to do, even when it seems uncomfortable, when it's not natural, when they don't have enough time for it, when it's something that they'd rather do something else. But we do it because we're committed to doing it because of that why. The why is an emotional reason why I'm going to, what am I going to achieve by doing this? How am I going to feel after I've done it? What's it going to look like in my life? And how am I going to feel in my life having been this new person that's changed? Now, I'll give you a good example. I had a patient who had a daughter who needed a kidney transplant, and he weighed about 100 pounds overweight. And the only person they could find that was a match for his daughter was himself. And the surgeon wouldn't operate and take his kidney to give it to his daughter because he was so overweight that it would be too much of a risk factor. So he said, I'll operate on you, but you've got to lose at least 50 pounds in the next 6 months. And I know you've been trying for the last 10 years to lose weight and you've never been able to do it, but that's the only way I'd operate on you. In the next 6 months, he lost 70 pounds, saved his daughter's life, gave her a kidney. He had a why. He wasn't going to let his daughter down. He wouldn't do it for himself maybe, but he wouldn't let his daughter down. I had another patient that he wanted to look better in his tuxedo as he walked his daughter down the aisle when she got married. And so he had a 6-month sort of a buy-in period to change his life because he wanted his daughter to be proud of him when she got married. If we can find out what our why is, if we can emotionally put that emotional context of what the change in your life, what your decreased health risk factors, what you're being able to walk or you're able to sleep better, what's that going to mean to your life on an emotional basis, and how does that parallel with your core values in your life? The more we can attach behavior to core values, the more we're likely to be successful, the more meaningful it'll be, and the more we're likely to do it because we've got a bigger reason than just our own self. So I think that's something the behavioral part of wellness medicine needs to tap into, is to help people feel, if I'm going to really be a fully actualized self, all of me, mind, body, and spirit, and be the best I can be, then I've got to do certain things to nurture that, or I'll never get there. So I've got to have a wellness plan for my physical life, and I've got to have a reason for why I want to do that.
Thank you.
I can just add one very quick thing to that.
Very quick.
I belong to a group of healthcare executives, and one of them gave us a presentation last night. And in terms of mental well-being, he came out with the statement that I'll never forget. And he said, listen, he said, in terms of mental health and mental well-being, sharing is caring. And it's actually okay not to be okay, and share it with somebody else. I'll leave it at that.
So thank you so much. Unfortunately, we came to the end of this interesting debate. I believe that we could spend another hour or two discussing about it. So I'll just ask you the last final question. What is your legacy you would both like to leave following those extensive wellness career?
Yes. The legacy that I would like to leave is just, I'd like to feel like I've been a part of the educational process so people can understand the facts clinically and scientifically about what the importance of this change is. And I'd like to be an inspiration for younger doctors to pick up the ball. And as Dorian and I sort of have done our work in the past, I'd like to encourage and inspire other young doctors to experience that for themselves. Because if I can be a conduit for other doctors to appreciate the value and the quality of the interpersonal relationship that Dorian and I have been able to experience, and the quality of the meaning of our lives because we've helped other people be all they can be, that would be a terrific thing. I feel like, I've said this before, I feel like in doing wellness medicine, I feel like I've recaptured my medical soul. And I'd like to help other doctors do the same for themselves and them for their patients.
And for me, to capture all of the things that Leah said, I'd like to create a thing called the Wellness Foundation, a trust, an international trust and charity that actually gives something back and supports all the things we've talked about today. And for me, that legacy would be there way beyond the years that we're going to be around.
And I'm right there with you.
And I'll say thank you so much to respect the time frame that we set. Thank you so much for joining us from the both sides of the Atlantic. I'm very happy to spend the last hour with you. And thank you also the audience for staying with us. I would love to stay in touch. You may also follow us in our upcoming events. If you have any questions, you can still leave them in the comment section, and I'll kindly ask Dr. Rice and Dr. Dugmore to help me to answer you, and we'll definitely come back to you. I'll say thank you, and stay safe, stay healthy, and take care. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, Lee. Bye,
Bye, Dorian.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.